Have you ever stopped to think about what happens when you answer an emergency call, but the person who called doesn't exist? When you find fresh blood on the asphalt, but there's no body. When you see someone die in front of you, and the next day you find out that person died 3 years ago, when everything you believed about reality, time, and death simply crumbles in a single night. My name is Marcus Webb. I was a state highway patrol officer 17 years ago. I emphasize was, because after that night of March 14th, 2023, I could never wear the uniform again. I could never drive on that highway again. And there are nights when I can't even close my eyes without seeing those figures, those faces, that impossible truth. This is the last time I'm going to tell this story. After this, I'm going to try, somehow, to move on. But you need to know. Because if one day you drive along Highway 66 between the towns of Millbrook and Ravens Creek between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., you need to know what you might find there. And most importantly, you need to know what to do when the impossible knocks on your car window. It all started like any other night shift. It was a Monday, one of those cold, silent March nights where the fog rises from the asphalt like ghostly fingers trying to grab anything that passes by. I was assigned to patrol the stretch of Highway 66 that cuts through Blackwood County, about 80 kilometers of virtually deserted road surrounded by dense pine forests and a few abandoned ranches. 17 years in the profession have taught me to read the night. You develop a sixth sense for when something is wrong. And that night, from the moment I started the patrol car's engine at 10:45 p.m., I felt that something was different. The air was heavy, too dense, as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. At 11:17 p.m., the first call came via radio. Dispatcher Rachel, whom I'd known for years, had that professional, controlled voice she always maintained, but I could detect a note of tension as she relayed information. A driver had called 911, reporting seeing a woman running desperately along the side of the highway at kilometer 34, near the old Redford gas station that had been closed for over a decade. What caught my attention was the description. The woman was wearing a white summer dress, barefoot, and appeared to be running from something. The driver who called said she was completely covered in blood and screaming, although he couldn't hear what she was saying from inside the car. He had stopped to try and help, but when he got out of the vehicle, she simply disappeared into the woods. I turned on the hazard lights and accelerated toward kilometer 34. The fog was getting thicker by the minute, reducing visibility to no more than 30 meters ahead. The vehicle's headlights cut through the mist like razors, but it was like trying to illuminate dirty water. You saw shapes, shadows, movement, but you were never sure if it was real or just tricks the fog played on your eyes. I reached kilometer 34 in less than 12 minutes. The Redford gas station was a decaying skeleton of concrete and rusted metal. The gas pumps were still there, covered in rust and faded graffiti, with hoses hanging like exposed intestines. The main structure of the building was partially collapsed, with boards nailed to the broken windows and an old sign hanging by a single screw, creaking in the wind like a slow, dying pendulum. I parked the patrol car at the entrance to the gas station, kept the emergency lights on, and grabbed my tactical flashlight. The car that had called was still there, a grey sedan with license plates from the neighboring state. The driver was leaning on the hood, smoking a cigarette with visibly trembling hands. He was a man in his 50s, with a prominent belly and a bald spot that shone under the headlights. As I approached, he threw the cigarette on the ground and stomped on it harder than necessary, as if he were trying to crush something other than the cigarette. His eyes were wide, and he kept staring at the line of trees beyond the gas station. I identified myself and asked him to tell me exactly what he had seen. He took a deep breath, wiped the sweat from his brow despite the cold, and began to speak in a voice that trembled like a leaf in the wind. He said he was returning from a business trip, driving along the highway when he saw, through the fog, what appeared to be a woman running along the side of the road. Initially, he thought it was a deer or some other animal, but as he passed her, he could clearly see that it was a person. A young woman, probably between 25 and 30 years old, wearing a white summer dress that was torn and stained with something dark. Blood, he was sure. She was barefoot, and her feet left red trails on the roadside. But the worst thing, he said, the absolute worst, was her face. She was screaming. Her mouth was agape in a silent shriek that he couldn't hear from inside the car. Her eyes were wide, not in terror, but in something worse, something he couldn't name. It was as if she were seeing something so horrible, so beyond human comprehension, that her brain simply couldn't process it. He stopped the car about 20 meters ahead, turned on the emergency lights, and got out to help her. But when he looked back, she had disappeared. She didn't run into the forest. She didn't throw herself to the ground. She simply wasn't there anymore, as if she had been erased from existence. He ran back to where he had last seen her and found something that made him immediately call 911. Bloody glues. These weren't normal footprints. They looked like they'd been burned into the asphalt, as if each step had been taken with feet so hot they'd slightly melted the road surface. And these footprints led straight into the forest, past the abandoned gas station. I asked him to stay in his vehicle while I investigated. I turned on my flashlight and followed the footprints. They were exactly as he had described, barefoot footprints imprinted on the asphalt with something that looked and smelled like burnt blood. The odor was nauseating, a mixture of iron, charred flesh, and something sweet and putrid that made my stomach churn. The footprints led to the entrance of the abandoned outpost. The front door was ajar, creaking softly in the wind. I pushed it open with my foot, keeping my hand on my gun holster, and went inside. The inside of the gas station was even more dilapidated than the outside. Fallen shelves, rotten products scattered on the floor, broken glass reflecting the light of my flashlight, like 1,000 eyes blinking in the darkness. There was graffiti on the walls, most of it illegible, but some formed words that looked like warnings. Don't sleep here. They come at night. She's still waiting. The footprints continued across the gas station floor, past the old counter, and disappeared into a back door that likely led to the storage room. My hand was on the doorknob when I heard it, a whisper. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't the creaking of the structure. It was a human voice, low and distant, coming from behind that door. A female voice whispering something I couldn't fully understand, but which sounded like a desperate plea. Open the door. The warehouse was empty, completely empty. No boxes, no furniture, nothing but bare concrete walls and a cracked cement floor. And absolutely no trace of the bloody footprints that had led me there. It was impossible. I had followed them to that door. They couldn't simply disappear. I searched the entire station, every corner, every shadow. Nothing, no sign of the woman, no evidence that anyone else was there besides me. I went back outside and told the driver I hadn't found anything. He seemed relieved and disturbed at the same time. I got his contact information, told him a report would be filled out, and let him go. He wasted no time. He started the car and drove off at a speed exceeding the limit, but I didn't care. I would have done the same. I stayed at the scene for another 20 minutes, examining the area more carefully. The bloody footprints were still there on the asphalt, but when I tried to photograph them with the patrol car's camera, they didn't appear in the images. It was as if the camera couldn't capture them. In the digital records, the asphalt appeared completely clean. I relayed everything to Rachel over the radio. She wrote down the information and told me to continue with the routine patrol. But her voice was different, more tense, as if she knew something she wasn't telling me. I should have noticed the pattern there, but at the time, I was still trying to rationalize everything as an isolated and bizarre incident. At 0:43, the second call came. Rachel returned to the radio, her voice urgent. Another driver had called 911, this time reporting a serious accident at kilometer 51 near the bridge over the Blackwater River. The caller said a car had left the road, rolled several times, and was now completely wrecked on the side of the road. He could see someone trapped in the wreckage, possibly seriously injured. I activated the siren and sped down the highway. Kilometer 51 was about 25 minutes from the Redford gas station. The bridge over the Blackwater River was an old metal structure that always made me slightly uncomfortable when I had to cross it. It had been built in the 1940s, and although it underwent regular maintenance, it always seemed to be on the verge of collapse. The river below was deep and dark, known for dangerous currents that had claimed more than one life over the decades. When I arrived at kilometer 51 at 1:09 a.m., I saw the car that had made the call parked on the shoulder with its emergency lights flashing. It was a red pickup truck, and the driver was outside, waving frantically at me. But what immediately caught my attention was what lay beyond him. About 50 meters from the road, in the middle of a field covered with low vegetation, lay the smoldering wreckage of a car. It was a silver sedan, completely destroyed. The roof was crushed to the level of the seats, all the windows shattered, and the bodywork twisted at impossible angles. Skid marks on the asphalt showed where the vehicle had left the road, crossed the shoulder, and rolled over multiple times before coming to rest in that position. I parked the car and ran to the driver of the pickup truck. He was a young man, no more than 25, with a military haircut and tattoos on his arms. He was clearly in shock, trembling uncontrollably as he pointed at the wreckage. He told me he was driving toward Ravens Creek when he saw the car ahead suddenly lose control, as if the driver had passed out at the wheel or been hit by something. The vehicle began to zigzag across the road, went onto the shoulder, and then violently rolled over at least 6 or 7 times before coming to a stop in that position. He stopped immediately, called 911, and ran to the wreckage. He managed to look inside through the broken windows and saw someone still trapped in the driver's seat, a woman. She was alive, trying to move, but she was badly injured and trapped by the wreckage. He tried to open the door to get her out, but it was completely locked. That's when he saw me coming. I grabbed my radio and immediately called for an ambulance and the fire department. The estimated time of arrival was at least 25 minutes. We were too far from the city. I grabbed the first aid kit from the patrol car and ran towards the wreckage, with the pickup truck driver following me. The closer I got, the more something seemed wrong. The car was smoking, but there was no smell of gasoline. There was no acrid odor of burning tires. There was no metallic smell of leaking fluids. It was something else. A strange, organic smell, like meat left in the sun for days, sweet and nauseating. I walked up to the driver's side door and looked inside, and my blood froze. There was a woman in the driver's seat. She was trapped in the wreckage, exactly as the pickup truck driver had described. But there was something profoundly wrong with her. Her body was in a position that defied human anatomy, limbs bent at impossible angles, her head turned in a direction that should have broken her neck long ago, and her eyes. His eyes were open and staring directly at me. They weren't normal human eyes. The pupils were too large, covering almost the entire iris, and there was something about the way they looked at me that was profoundly unnatural, as if she were studying, calculating, waiting. But the worst part was that she was smiling, a slow, deliberate smile that widened more and more, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too numerous. And then she began to speak. Her voice was a hoarse whisper, but somehow I could hear it perfectly despite the wreckage and twisted metal around us. She said my name, my full name, Marcus Andrew Webb. And then she said something that made every hair on my body stand on end. She said, "You're late. I've been waiting so long. Since that night on the bridge. Do you remember the bridge, Marcus? Do you remember what you did?" I had no idea what she was talking about. I had never seen her before in my life, but there was something in her voice, something in the way she pronounced my name that awakened a memory buried deep in my subconscious, something I didn't want to remember. I turned to the pickup truck driver to ask if he was hearing it too, but he was at least 10 meters away, hands on his knees, vomiting violently on the ground. When I looked back at the car, the woman had disappeared. He didn't move. He didn't crawl out. He simply wasn't there anymore. The driver's seat was empty, covered only by broken glass and stains of something dark that could be blood. But there was something else. On the shattered windshield, written in what appeared to be fresh blood, was a message: Kilometer 66, midnight, every year, you know. My breathing was rapid. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. I grabbed my flashlight and examined every inch of that car. There was no one inside. There was no one underneath. There was nowhere she could have gone without me seeing. The pickup truck driver finally recovered enough to approach again. I asked if he had seen the woman get out of the car. He looked at me as if I had gone crazy and said there was no one in the car, that he had looked inside before I arrived and the car was already empty, that he had called 911 because he thought there might be someone. But when he got a clear view, he realized he was mistaken. But he had told me just minutes before that he had seen a woman trapped in the wreckage. I wasn't imagining it. He had said it clearly. When I confronted him, he became even more confused and insisted that he never said such a thing, that he only reported an accident with no apparent victims. Something was completely wrong. I waited for the ambulance and firefighters to arrive. When they finally showed up, they examined the vehicle and confirmed that there was no one inside. There was no blood. There was no tissue. There was no evidence that anyone had been driving that car when it rolled over. And when I photographed the message on the windshield, it didn't show up in the images, just like the footprints from the Redford gas station. They ran the vehicle's license plate. The car had been reported stolen 3 days earlier in a city about 200 kilometers away, but there was no clue as to who was driving it or why it had rolled over like that. The scene was cordoned off for further investigation, and I released the pickup truck driver to continue his journey. He didn't need me to tell him twice. He got in the vehicle and sped away, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. I stood there for a few more minutes, looking at the wreckage, at that invisible message on the windshield, and at the bridge over the Blackwater River, about 500 meters ahead. "Do you remember the bridge, Marcus?" I remembered. Of course I remembered, but it was impossible for her to know that. Impossible. At 2:31 a.m., the third call came. This time, Rachel didn't even wait for me to report the accident situation. Her voice on the radio was tense, almost breaking. She said she had received an extremely disturbing call from a woman who claimed to be being chased by someone on Highway 66, near kilometer 58. The call had been made just 2 minutes earlier, and the woman was in absolute panic. She said she was driving alone when she noticed a car following her for several kilometers. Initially, she thought it was a coincidence, but the vehicle always maintained the same distance, no matter if she accelerated or decelerated. Then the car started to approach, faster and faster, until it was right up against her rear bumper, its high beams blinding her mirrors. She tried to accelerate to get away, but the other vehicle always caught up. She tried to brake hard to force it to overtake, but it braked too, maintaining the same menacing position. And then, according to her, the driver of the other car started honking. It wasn't a normal honk. It was a prolonged, continuous sound that lasted for minutes without stopping, as if someone had their hand permanently pressed against the horn. The call had been abruptly cut off 30 seconds ago. I sped toward kilometer 58, which was only a few minutes away from where I was. The bridge over the Blackwater River lay behind me, and I entered a straight, secluded stretch of highway surrounded by dense forests on both sides. I could see the brake lights of 2 vehicles in the distance. One was stopped in the middle of the road, the other was behind it, also stopped, but with its headlights still on high beam. I activated all the emergency lights in the vehicle and accelerated. As I approached, I could see that the car in front was a small silver Honda. The one behind was a dark sedan, perhaps a 1990s model, with paint that appeared to be peeling and rust visible even from a distance. I parked the vehicle diagonally, partially blocking the lane, and turned on the spotlight to illuminate the scene. I grabbed my weapon and exited the vehicle, keeping cover behind the open door. I used the vehicle's loudspeaker to announce my presence and order the drivers to exit their vehicles with their hands visible. Nothing happened. Both cars remained completely still, no visible movement inside them. I repeated the order, this time with more authority. Nothing yet. I grabbed my radio and reported the situation to Rachel, requesting backup. She informed me that the nearest patrol car was at least 40 minutes away, responding to another incident. I was alone. I kept my weapon low but ready and slowly advanced toward the silver Honda. When I reached the driver's side window, I tapped on the glass and used my flashlight to illuminate the interior. There was a woman in the driver's seat, young, perhaps in her early 20s, with blonde hair tied in a ponytail. Her hands still gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her fingers were white, but her face was frozen in an expression of utter terror. Her eyes wide, fixed on the rearview mirror. Her mouth open in a silent scream. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she wasn't moving. Not at all. It was as if she had been frozen in time, captured in that exact moment of terror. I tried to open the door. It was locked. I banged on the glass harder, identifying myself and ordering her to open the door. No response. She remained in exactly the same position, like a wax statue. I glanced at the dark sedan behind her. The headlights were still on, blinding me, but I could make out the shape of someone sitting in the driver's seat. Keeping my weapon in position, I advanced towards the second vehicle. The closer I got, the more something seemed profoundly wrong. The car itself looked old, not just old, but in a way that didn't make sense. The bodywork was deteriorated in a way that would indicate decades of neglect. There was advanced rust covering the entire hood. The windshield was cracked in 1,000 different places. The tires were so bald, they were practically non-existent. How had that car gotten there in that condition? I went to the driver's side window and pointed my flashlight inside, and my world crumbled. The man in the driver's seat was dead, but he didn't die recently. He's been dead for a long time. His body was in an advanced state of decomposition. The skin had become stretched leather over the bones. The eyes were just empty sockets. The clothes were rotten and stained with bodily fluids that had long since dried, and an indescribable smell of putrefaction emanated from inside the car when I opened the door, because, unlike the Honda, this door wasn't locked. My body partially collapsed to the side when the door opened, and I recoiled, fighting the urge to vomit. But then I saw something that made my blood run cold again. The corpse's hands were still on the steering wheel, and one of them was pressed against the horn that was no longer sounding, but that had been sounding throughout the chase, according to the woman who had called 911. I picked up my radio with trembling hands and reported that I had found a body in an advanced state of decomposition in one of the vehicles. Rachel was silent for a long moment before replying that she was sending the medical examiner and the criminal investigation team. I went back to the silver Honda. The woman was still in the same position, frozen in that moment of terror. I used the baton to break the driver's side window. The glass shattered, but she still didn't move. I reached out and touched her neck to check her pulse. Her skin was icy, cold as marble. There was no pulse, no breath. Her eyes were fixed and lifeless, though still wide with terror. She was dead, but how? There were no visible signs of trauma, no apparent injuries. She simply died of fear. Was it possible to die of pure fear? I forced the door open from the inside and checked her vital signs again. Definitely dead. The body was still slightly warm, suggesting this had happened very recently, maybe minutes before I arrived. I tried to piece together what had happened. She was being chased by the dark sedan. The sedan's driver was honking constantly. She stopped, or was forced to stop. And then, what? Did she simply die of terror upon seeing what was inside that car? But the sedan's driver had been dead for weeks, maybe months. How could he have been driving just a few minutes ago? I examined the interior of the Honda more carefully. In the back passenger seat, I found her purse. Inside it, her wallet with documents. Her name was Emily Richardson, 26 years old, resident of Millbrook. And then I found his cell phone number. It was still unlocked, the screen showing the last thing she had accessed before she died. It was her call log. The last call had been made to 911 at 2:29 a.m., just 6 minutes before I arrived. But when I scrolled a little further down the call log, my heart almost stopped. There was another call, made at 11:15 p.m. that same night, for the 911. Call duration, 3 minutes and 47 seconds, and the location recorded by the phone's GPS, kilometer 34, Redford gas station. Emily Richardson was the woman in the white dress that the first driver had seen running down the road. But how was that possible? I was at the Redford gas station at 11:30 p.m. There was nobody there. And now she was here, dead, almost 30 kilometers away, unless she had never been to the Redford gas station. Unless what that driver had seen was something more. Something that wasn't Emily Richardson, something that had taken on its form. I checked the dark sedan again. I ran the license plate through the system. The vehicle was registered to Robert Marsh, reported missing on March 14, 2003, exactly 20 years ago. On the same day, March 14th, the decomposing body in the driver's seat was Robert Marsh. And somehow, impossible as it may seem, he had chased Emily Richardson down the highway tonight, 20 years after her death. The backup and forensic team arrived about 40 minutes later. While I waited, I sat in the patrol car, trying to process what was happening, trying to find a logical explanation for it all. But there was no logic. There was no explanation. There was only one pattern emerging, a pattern that pointed to a single date, a single location. March 14th, kilometer 66. And then I remembered, completely, vividly, as if a dam had burst in my mind and all the memories I had repressed came rushing back at once. 20 years ago, March 14th, 2003. I wasn't a highway patrol officer yet. I was just a young rookie cop working in Millbrook. That night, I was off duty, driving home after having a few beers with colleagues. I shouldn't have been driving. I knew that, but I thought I was fine. I thought I was in control. I was on Highway 66, approaching the bridge over the Blackwater River. It was exactly midnight, and then I saw her, a woman in the middle of the road, white summer dress, barefoot, waving desperately for me to stop, but I was driving too fast, and my reflexes were impaired. I tried to brake, I tried to swerve, more available. The impact threw her body over the hood. She hit the windshield, leaving a star-shaped crack, and then fell onto the bridge. And I panicked. I stopped the car, I got out. I looked back, there was no body, there was no blood. It was as if she had simply vanished. I convinced myself that I had imagined it all, that it was the alcohol, that it had never really happened. I got back in the car and drove home, and for 20 years, I repressed that memory. I buried it so deeply that I managed to convince myself it had never happened, but it happened. And her name was Emily Richardson. I killed Emily Richardson 20 years ago on that bridge, and now, somehow, she was coming back. Not just her, but others. Robert Marsh, who had died that same night, he was driving behind me when I hit Emily. He stopped to help and suffered a fatal heart attack right there on the bridge. They were all coming back, and it was because of me. At 3:48 a.m., the fourth and final call came. Rachel was crying when her voice came through the radio. I'd never heard her like that. In 15 years of working with her, Rachel had always been a cold and calculating professional. But now she was sobbing uncontrollably as she relayed the information. There was a call from a driver at kilometer 66. Exactly at kilometer 66, he reported seeing multiple people standing in the middle of the road. Men, women, even children, all wearing clothes from different eras, all bloodied, all motionless, just watching the cars go by. And in the center of them, there was a woman in a white dress. She was holding a sign. The sign read, "Marcus Webb, midnight, you are late." My body was trembling when I picked up the radio. I asked Rachel what the exact time was, 03:51. It was only 9 minutes to 4 in the morning. I should have left. I should have abandoned the car right there and run, but I knew it wouldn't have done any good. They weren't giving me a choice. They were calling me. I drove slowly toward kilometer 66. The fog was thicker than at any other time of night. The car's headlights could barely penetrate the gray wall ahead of me. And then I saw them, exactly as the caller had described. At least 20 people standing in the middle of the highway. Men in suits from the 1940s, women in dresses from the 1960s, teenagers in clothes from the 1980s, young children in school uniforms from decades past, all covered in blood. All with horrific and visible injuries, and everyone was staring at me with empty, lifeless eyes. At the center of them was Emily Richardson, or what was left of it. Half of her face was crushed from the impact with my car. Her arms were broken in multiple places, hanging at impossible angles. Her white dress was soaked with fresh blood that dripped steadily onto the asphalt. She was holding the sign. I stopped the car about 20 meters from them. There was no way to get past. There was no way back. I was surrounded. Emily dropped the sign and started walking toward me. The others remained motionless, just watching. Each of her steps left a bloody footprint on the asphalt. The same kind of footprint I'd seen at the Redford gas station. Now I understood. These weren't her footprints from today. These were the footprints she'd left 20 years ago when she tried to crawl away from the bridge after I ran her over. Because I hadn't killed her right then and there. She had survived the initial impact, and there she was, crawling, bleeding and broken, trying to reach the side of the highway to ask for help. But I didn't see it, or I pretended not to see it, and I drove home, leaving her to die alone on that bridge. Emily stopped beside the driver's side window. Slowly, very slowly, she raised a crushed hand and tapped on the glass. 3 slow, deliberate beats, and then she spoke. Her voice didn't come from her mouth. It came from everywhere at once. From the police car radio, from the wind, from the road itself. Every year, Marcus. Every year, on the same night, we return. All those who died on this highway and never found justice. All those who were abandoned, forgotten, left to die alone in the darkness. We return to find those who left us. And tonight, Marcus Andrew Webb, we meet you. The other figures began to move, slowly walking toward the vehicle from all sides, their hands raised, their dead faces fixed on me. I tried to start the engine. The key turned, but nothing happened. Dead. I tried the radio. Static. I tried my cell phone. No signal. They were closer now, less than 2 meters away. I could hear their feet dragging on the asphalt. I could smell the stench of decay emanating from them. Emily pressed her bruised face against the window. Her one functioning eye stared at me with a burning intensity. You have 2 choices, Marcus. You can come with us now, join us on this road, returning every night of March 14th forever. Or, she paused, and something that could have been a smile formed on what remained of her lips. Or you can tell the truth, confess what you did, every detail, and spend the rest of your life trying to make peace with the lives you destroyed. Choose now. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I couldn't do anything but look into those dead eyes and know, with absolute certainty, that she was telling the truth. If I didn't confess, I would become one of them. Trapped on that highway, returning every year, haunting the living, searching for justice that would never come. With trembling hands, I picked up my voice recorder, something every police officer carries to record statements. I turned it on and began to speak. I confessed everything. Because I was driving drunk. How I ran over Emily Richardson. I saw her crawling on the bridge, still alive, and drove away. How I suppressed the memory for 20 years. How I became a police officer, possibly to try and compensate for my buried guilt. Every life I saved on this highway was a pathetic attempt to balance out the single life I took. I spoke for almost 15 minutes. Each word felt like a piece of my soul was being ripped away. When I finished, tears were streaming down my face. My body was trembling uncontrollably, and Emily smiled. It wasn't a cruel smile. It was sad, tired, but also peaceful. "Thank you," she whispered. And then, one by one, they all began to disappear. They didn't vanish like ghosts in movies. They simply ceased to exist, as if someone had pressed delete on their existence. Within seconds, I was alone again on the empty road. The fog began to dissipate. The car's engine spontaneously restarted. The radio crackled back with Rachel's voice, asking about my status, but I couldn't answer. I sat there for another hour, just staring at that stretch of road where 20 souls had stood moments before. When the sun finally began to rise, I drove back to the police station. I went straight to my superior's office and handed over the voice recorder. I confessed everything again, in person, officially. I was arrested that same morning. The trial was quick: manslaughter, failure to render aid, driving under the influence resulting in death. They gave me 12 years. I served 8 before being released for good behavior. That was 3 months ago. And now I'm telling you this publicly for the first time, because Emily was right. The only way to find peace, both for me and for them, was through the truth. But let me ask a few final questions. Have you ever driven down the same road at night and felt like something was watching you from the trees? Have you ever driven past an accident on the side of the road, but when you looked in your rear-view mirror, there was nothing there? Have you ever seen someone standing in the middle of the highway, only to blink and they disappear? Have you ever heard a voice on your car radio saying your name, but there was no one broadcasting it? If the answer is yes to any of these questions, maybe you've seen them too. The abandoned, the forgotten, those who died alone in the darkness of empty roads. They're still there, waiting, watching. What if you're driving at night and you see someone who needs help? For God's sake, stop. Help. Because if you don't stop, if you drive away and leave them there, one day they will come back to you. And that night, you'll be the one standing in the middle of the road, waiting, watching, seeking justice forever. Note from Channel 911. This is a story based on real accounts from highway patrol officers and unresolved emergency calls. If you want to know more terrifying cases like this, download our exclusive ebook with 20 true horror stories from 911 operators, paramedics, and police officers. The link is in the pinned comments of this video. These are the stories they should never have told. These are the truths that should have remained buried. But now you know, and knowledge like that comes at a price. Sleep well, if you can.